English translation, 265th contact. Thursday, 11th June, 1998, 01:30 hours.
Florina, very happy to see you. Be welcomed and greetings.
I am also happy to see you and to welcome you, even though my coming is not very pleasant. Once again, your safety is at risk, as I know it has often been the case. Our observations have shown that the foreign beings known to you as the Men in Black are again becoming active against you, in connection with the fact that you have publicly denounced their machinations with regard to the photo forgeries. I am not only talking about the photo forgeries in relation to Ascot and Nera, but also about all the other photo material that has been falsified and foisted on you.
I am very happy that you warned me, but you are a little late with this warning, because I have already been confronted with the new machinations of the rabble on the 8th and 10th of June. You probably have not looked at the control disk yet, otherwise you would know about the incidents.
What has happened? No, we do the inspection at the end of this month.
Well, once again I was shot at, but this time it was devilishly close to being hit. That was 3 days ago on the 8th of June. Only 2 hours later, there was another attack, with a throwing knife that was hurled at me.
I am horrified!
I regret that. But everything went smoothly.
Of course I am very happy about that, but still I am scared about what happened. I see you are carrying a gun, which I was wondering about when you came in. But please be very careful anyway.
Of course. What do you actually think about the fact that not only I, but also the other group members could be endangered? I think that this is not the case, but that I am the only one being targeted.
That is right, because that is also what our considerations and clarifications have revealed. You are the authoritative person to be rendered harmless. Other group members could only be endangered by an unfortunate coincidence. So they can all feel safe, even when they are doing their guard duty.
That is reassuring to hear. Here, for the July bulletin, I have written down the 2 incidents in broad outline in order to orient the bulletin readership.
May I read the lines?
Of course. Here you go.
Thank you. My horror is not wrong. Have you reported the incidents to the police?
No, and I am not going to do that. In 2 earlier murder attempts, I was still so blue-eyed, naive, as to turn to the police. They, however, only trivialized everything and tried to attribute other facts to the whole thing, although there was at least one witness present who confirmed my statement. That was enough for me, because I can joke around with myself. I really do not need the police for that.
I know that several witnesses were present when the assassination attempts were made on you.
That is right, and they testify to what happened. Nevertheless, they even accuse me of lying and claim that I committed the attacks myself, or hired other people to shoot at me, or have myself otherwise murdered.
You cannot be serious.
But it is, because certain enemies do not shy away from slander, nor from assassinations. I think that the attacks are less based on Earth-human initiatives than on the machinations of the Men in Black, whereby this rabble influences unstable Earthlings who then attack me.
This also corresponds to what we know. The influences and the related possibilities with regard to the post-hypnotic exercise of coercion on unstable Earth humans are extremely distinctive.
Then the assassin Earthlings are under post-hypnotic coercion.
8th and the 10th of June, 1998.
Once again, 2 remarkable dates, since on these days they have tried 2 more times to promote me from the living to the blessed. Probably in response to the correction in Bulletin number 16 and on the Internet regarding the rotten machinations of the Men in Black with regard to the Ascot Nera photo forgeries, to which also Cal K. Korf and LB have taken a negative stance against me, because they believe they have to make themselves big and important in the matter of the alleged debunker of the Billy Meier swindle, whereby they are also not afraid to use others for their slander. And now that this openly slanderous behavior of theirs has led to the correction in Bulletin number 16 and on the Internet, I would like to say that they bear some blame for the fact that new attacks have been made on me and my life. And this after long years of effective calm, during which no such attacks were made on me.
Billy shows the bullet hole in the red maple tree from the assassination attempt on the 8th of June 1998 at 1640 Ars Tower. Photo, Freddie Kropf.
Well, the facts of the attacks were the following. On the 8th of June 1998 at 1640 Ars, I was about to walk from the carriage house in the Simjase Silver Star Center in the direction of the fire pit and Schmidrutiwald storage area, when suddenly a shot rang out from the left, just as I had passed the right edge no driving sign and was at the height of the nearby red maple tree. With the bang of the gunshot, I felt the draft of a bullet against my forehead. At least, that is how I interpreted the faint draft. And when the center residents and I searched the crime scene about 30 minutes later, after we had already inspected the immediate and wider area, we found the bullet hole of a .22 caliber bullet in the trunk of the red maple tree. The bullet hole was exactly at the level of my forehead when I stood next to the tree. Unfortunately, we were not able to find the person who shot at me, because during the time I ran into the house and fetched a gun so as not to be defenseless against another attack, the person who shot at me was able to disappear unseen. The shot was heard both by Connie Wechter, who was standing just in sight about 30 meters away from me, and by her daughter Aruna, who was close to her.
AI colorized photo. The bullet hole in the red maple tree from the assassination attempt on Billy on 8th of June 1998 at 1640 HRs. Photo, Freddie Kropf.
But the shot was also heard by Eva Bieri in her office, as well as by Davide Turla, a passive member, at the Schmidrutiwald campsite about 50 meters away. Connie Wechter was therefore in direct line of sight of me and could observe me closely. But she did not see the person shooting either, which is not surprising, because as the three of us could see later, he was hiding in the bushes on the mountainside, where I could not see him, although he was only about 8 meters away from me. And just at this distance, it seems like a miracle that the shot missed me, even if only by a millimeter or two on the forehead. With the failed shot, I thought, the matter was once again settled as it had always been with all previous shots. But far from it, because 1 and 2 hours later, in the early hours of the morning of the 10th of June, there was another attack at 305 HRs, this time with a cheap throwing knife, which the attacker obviously did not know how to use, fortunately for me. Silvano Lehman was on guard duty that night and was just on his way below the garage car park when I walked across the square and approached him, hearing noises twice on the wooded uphill side. Although the moon was in the sky and dimly illuminated the car park and Silvano and I, we were unable to see anything in the direction of the sound because everything there was in darkness due to the woodland. Standing a little higher in front of Silvano, face to face through the car park embankment, we listened into the darkness for 1, 2, or 3 minutes. Then suddenly I felt a violent thump in the kidney area of the left side of my body, which was followed by a metallic clang as something fell to the ground to my left. Of course, as I had my torch in my hand, I immediately shone it on the ground to see what had hit me and fallen to the ground. Silvano and I immediately saw that it was a throwing knife, which had apparently been hurled at me in an uninformed manner and luckily hit me in the kidney area with the pommel first because it was probably spinning on its own axis during the flight, which caused a considerable pain that was slow to subside and lasted for several days. If the knife had missed me and had thus flown past me, It would certainly have spun again in flight and hit directly in Silvano's face, who was standing somewhat lower on the lower path, only about a meter in front of me.
A throwing knife with sheath found after the assassination attempt on Billy on the 10th of June 1998. Photo, Freddie Croft.
When we immediately flashed our lamps and illuminated the darkness on the mountainside and very quickly searched the footpath there, we could already find nothing. However, except for the obviously lost throwing knife sheath. Because obviously the knife-throwing person was quicker with his disappearance than we were. Because after all, we first had to walk 10 meters before we reached the footpath. 10 meters, which was also the distance over which the throwing knife was hurled at me. What I can say about it is only this. I find it pathetic and sad that people want to get rid of the truth in this manner, no matter whether the men in black were behind the attacks and used an unstable Earth human being for their dirty purposes as usual, or whether it was simply a confused Billy Meier enemy, which I doubt, though, because I rather think of men in black machinations, because most of the attacks that have been carried out so far are due to them influencing unstable Earth humans and forcing them to dance to their will, because they do not do the dirty work themselves, and certainly not with their own sophisticated weapons, whose mode of action would reveal secrets that must remain as such. Either way, they are, in my opinion, poor lunatics who will one day have to wear their own skin to the market, fetching an immensely poor price for it.
Assassination attempt no. 15.
It was a warm summer night on the 9th or 10th of June 1998. I was on guard duty that night and was on my way down to the garage car park when I heard Billy's footsteps coming towards me from the house. He stopped in front of me, slightly elevated by the car park embankment. We spoke briefly, during which he said that he had heard noises on the wooded side of the mountain twice before. Although the moon was in the sky and dimly illuminated the car park and the two of us, we were unable to see anything in the direction of the sound because everything there was in darkness due to the woodland. We listened into the darkness for a minute or two. Suddenly, Billy flinched in front of me, and at the same time I heard a metallic clang on the ground next to him. Billy immediately shone his torch on the floor to his left. That is when we saw that it was a throwing knife that had apparently been hurled at him by an amateur killer unaware of the situation. Fortunately, the knife spun on its axis in flight and struck him pommel first in the kidney area, causing him considerable pain that lasted for several days. If the knife had missed Billy, it would have flown past him, and if it had spun in the air again, it would have hit me directly in the face, as I was standing a little lower on the lower path, only about a meter in front of him. When we immediately flashed our lights, illuminated the darkness on the mountainside, and very quickly searched the trail there. However, we could already find nothing, except for the obviously lost throwing knife sheath. The person throwing the knife was obviously faster than us in disappearing, because we had to walk 10 meters before we reached the hiking trail. 10 meters, which was also the distance over which the throwing knife was hurled at Billy. Silvano Lehmann, Switzerland.
That is the meaning of my words. Those under compulsion cannot act otherwise.
But one thing amazes me. How can the people who are forced to do so always disappear so quickly and soundlessly?
They are programmed by post-hypnosis to carry out the attacks in certain places, from where they can also silently and quickly remove themselves again. One peculiarity is that they never wait for the result of their attack, but leave the place immediately after the attack, or hide in such a way that they cannot be found. This also means that they are forced by hypnotic commands to wear light, fine shoes that hardly make any noise. The clothing must also be adapted to the surroundings of the previously scouted out location.
Although I know the reasons why the men in black do not appear to me themselves, I still find it strange why I have not seen anything of these rascals for years. The last time was when the guys attacked my daughter Gilgamesha and apparently wanted to kidnap her.
It is not that strange. Because at least the group of these foreigners who were up to no good in the first few years are prevented from appearing on the center's grounds themselves by a reporting system we installed. However, if they were to try this, which was the case several times before, we would immediately take action against them, which, however, is extremely undesirable to them, so they disappear without a trace, without us being able to decipher their flight coordinates for their leap in time, because they are so cleverly encrypted and fragmented that we are unable to decipher them even with our best technical capabilities. Which is also the reason that we have not yet been able to put a stop to their evil handiwork, as you like to say.
But to my knowledge, Ptah told me, there is also a group of men who are controlled by the Earth authorities, who only dress in black and drive around with black cars in order to put pressure on so-called UFO observers and so on.
That is right, but they have not played a role in your case yet.
Did they have anything to do with the Secret Service agents who were on me?
No, in no wise.
But now it makes me wonder whether the Earthlings, who are under post-hypnotic pressure, cannot defend themselves against it.
They are all unstable Earthlings who are chosen for the purposes of the assassinations. And of course, they are not able to defend themselves against them in such a manner that they can free themselves from the coercion. Such impulses may well appear in them, which then makes them uncertain about the execution of the deed, which was often your happiness, but they cannot disobey the order.
We talked about this in the group and thought about it in this direction. But this topic should be enough. And besides, if you are here, I would like to ask you some questions for which it would be important to answer them publicly, if you allow it.
I do not have much time, but bring up your questions. If I run out of time, I will tell you. Question now.
Thank you very much. My first question. Are you oriented about the connections of the TWA 800 crash in July 1996? Do you know what I am talking about?
Of course I understand. Yes, I know the connections. What is your question?
Here I have a newspaper article from 27.5. 1998. It comes from the Blick, a tabloid. Please read it here.
I can only explain that we have clear records that clearly prove that the plane was hit by a missile that was supposed to shoot down the TWA 800 for defense reasons, because a misinterpretation led to the assumption that the plane was an unknown and hostile object. The missile, however, did not explode due to a malfunction of its detonator, but merely tore a hole in the aircraft and continued to shoot, only to fall somewhere into the sea. Due to circumstances unknown to us, a sparking mechanism must have been created when the projectile hit, which caused the aviation fuel to explode. It may be natural for someone to have brought a bomb aboard the TWA, but it certainly did not explode, if there was a bomb aboard at all. Our records did not mislead us, nor did our investigations, to the effect that the missile projectile was the cause of the aircraft being damaged and then caused to explode by a sparking mechanism. If the story about the man applies as it is set out in the written, then at least not in the sense that his bomb, if there actually was one, exploded. If such a bomb actually existed, then it must either have been found by the salvage crews or thrown out somewhere into the sea where it was not found.
Then I have another question about the South American group that works around with Earth-made flying discs. Always assuming you know about these things and can answer my questions.
Of course, I am aware of the concerns you have mentioned, precisely with regard to the South American group, because all of us who have to fulfill our tasks here on and around the Earth have to learn all the important things and connections.
Well, then I have a reader's question for one of the next bulletins, which I answered according to my knowledge. Now, I would like to ask you if my answer was correct or not, and if there might be something that needs to be added. If you want to read through everything, please.
But that should be the last for today, because afterwards I have to turn again to my other duties.
Reader's question. What happens to the knowledge from the research and construction of the successor flight discs of the German South American group, which consists only of men, if one day the group no longer exists due to the death of its members? If these men live so far back and have no contact with other people outside their area, then they have no successors who could continue or end their experiments technical in nature. Will the Pleiaren later eliminate these machines, or what happens to this legacy? One can only hope that this technology will not fall into the wrong hands. Can you make a statement about the technological lead compared to today's conventional drives? How great are the successes of this group in researching these alternative drives? Cătălin Morarescu, Germany.
Answer today. The South American group exists only as a small and closed community of old men who are decimated from year to year by their death and do not pose any danger to the world, not even with regard to their technology. The leading technical minds died a long time ago, the last of them about 15 years ago. The rest of the workforce was made up of auxiliaries and fanatical leaders who, in terms of technical developments, must be called zero forces. Even workers who were responsible for the maintenance of the technical equipment and aircraft, etc., have not existed for quite some time, which of course means that most of the equipment and aircraft have already been destroyed, so that in 1996 there were only 2 operational aircraft left, which at that time also had serious defects. Regarding the plans for the flying discs, it has to be said that these were already destroyed in the 60s by certain circumstances, about which I can give no information at all. As far as discarded aircraft are concerned, the following factors must be taken into account. Various flying discs were completely destroyed in crashes to such an extent that no technical knowledge can be gained from them, should they ever be found. The reason for this total destruction was a self-destruct mechanism that is built into every flying disc, even the 2 that existed at least in 1996. The self-destruction was so effective that it completely shredded the flying disc and practically tore it apart when the self-ignition was triggered. The self-destruct mechanism has been an integral part of the flying disc since the beginning of its existence, very cleverly constructed and deadly safe. A flying disc could never and should never be left unattended because otherwise it would automatically destroy itself. In this consequence, a guard always had to remain on board the aircraft in order to prevent the self-destruction of the flying screen, because the self-destruction mechanism was constructed in such a wise that no treason could be practiced and no escape could be made. Once the self-destruct mechanism had been activated, it could not and cannot be deactivated in such a wise that the self-destruction of the flying disc could have been prevented. A prevention of the self-destruction was and is only possible for 60 minutes at a time, after which the self-destruction automatically starts, if not caused by a complicated sensor, which could only be or can only be influenced in a certain manner, another 60 minutes delay. However, this meant and still means today, when the remaining 2 flying discs still exist, that day and night, a guard person remains in the aircraft and has to calm down the self-destruct mechanism every hour and thus influence it. If this does not happen, the mechanism becomes active and can no longer be stopped, completely destroying and tearing apart the aircraft. This also eliminates the danger that is mentioned in the question of what happens to all technology, as a legacy, so to speak, when the last of the South American group blesses the beyond. The technique of self-destruction is certainly not new, but its nature and function are based on a high level of technical and electronic development. And the facilities of the South American group base are also equipped with such self-destruct mechanisms, so that all facilities are completely destroyed if the delay mechanism is no longer activated. However, hardly anyone will notice this when the time comes, because the group's facilities are well camouflaged in previously unexplored areas of the jungle rainforest. So there is no reason to fear that the technology of the group will fall into other hands. Billy.
Your answer explanation is appropriate. It has to be said, however, that of all flying discs, only one is left, which, however, already has flight-inhibiting defects and will probably be destroyed within the next few months. It is not necessary to say more about this.
Thank you very much. Then I do not have any more questions.
Then goodbye, and be really careful.
Goodbye. I will be really careful.